السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Express our heartfelt condolences. Imam al-Zaman alayhi salam, to the people of Palestine, to the people of Lebanon, all the oppressed nations in the world, all the free people in the world, Muslims, non-Muslims, for the great calamities and the immense loss that have been experienced. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He may accept the shuhada, that He may accept the marhumin, inshallah, that He may envelop them with His mercy, and that inshallah He may group them in the highest ranks of paradise with Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. To the souls of the shuhada and the marhumin, please recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Obviously, when we exchange words of condolences and consolation to each other, when calamities happen, when we lose people whom we love, whom we respect, one reason we do this is so that we show compassion to each other, so that we support the hearts of each other, so that we show that we're there for them in the difficult moments, for the people who are experiencing the loss, experiencing the calamity. This is very beautiful. This is something that is humane. That's a human value. That's something that we should stick to. Another reason we do it is also that it's an opportunity for us to remind ourselves of the values, allegiance that we have, what values we commit ourselves to. When we console ourselves, when we express condolences on the shahada of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, for example, not only are we consoling the hearts of the believers for the anniversary of the great loss, the most painful loss, but also we're reminding ourselves of the values that we adhere and commit to, the values that Hussein alayhi salam gave his life for. Values of justice everywhere. Values of justice even if it was against your own self, your own people. The value of love for people, for the creation of God. That's a value that Hussein put his life forward to protect. Value of freedom. Freedom, the highest levels of freedom. Values of family and care for family. Values of supporting those who are in need. Responding to their call when they call. That's a value that we protect. When we console ourselves, when we express condolences, we're actually saying that these are the values. We're consoling each other's hearts for the loss of people who represent these values for us. That look, if anyone wants to take these values away from us, they have to take our lives first. Because that means that we are stripped of any humanity and we see no life without these values, which are human values. That's something that is very important that I thought to share. Another value or a set of values that we have and we believe in is mentioned in the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran mentions and gives us a clear vision about our worldview towards this world, this life. a clear vision about the nature of calamities and the nature of tests. The fact that our life from the time that we're born to the time that we leave this dunya is a set of continuous tests. The good moments, the bad moments, the happy moments, the sad moments. All these are non-ending tests. That's what the Quran tells us. And we see the Quran riddled with stories. Stories of prophets, stories of people who have suffered loss, loss in property, loss in loved ones, who have suffered oppression, who were enforced to suppress their values or to let go of their values. We see stories of prophets. One of these stories is the beautiful story that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates for us. It's the most beautiful story in the Quran. The story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates for us all this beautiful, or these beautiful events. It's not a bedtime story. The Quran, a few hundreds of pages, a few thousands of verses, there is a limit in the number of words and the number of pages. The Holy Messenger of God, he had also a limited time, 23 years, to communicate the message. There was a limitation. When Allah narrates for us or gives us a story of some prophet or some people, it is not for entertainment. It is supposed to be a book that should guide us till the day of judgment. So every people till the day of judgment, they should be able to derive lessons from these stories. These are not stories for entertainment. These are not bedtime stories. We look at the story of Yusuf and we notice the sequence of events or experiences that were tough experiences that Yusuf went through. We zoom in to the life of Yusuf, this individual, and we observe these episodes. Someone who just opened his eyes to life, a young boy. Instead of receiving love and compassion from his brothers, he receives envy and hate from his brothers, his own siblings, his own people. People around him failed him. Instead of receiving protection and relying on his brothers, instead he faced what? He was abandoned. He was kidnapped. They attempted to murder him. They separated him from his father, from his family, from his origin. He was deserted. He was thrown down a pit, a well, a deep one, in the nowhere. He was taken later and sold as a slave. He lost his freedom. He grew up in a palace where at some point in time that lady would force him to sin, to disobey God. And he would rather to go to prison. He chose to go to prison than committing a sin that arguably no one would have ever known about. No one would have ever seen. The reputation of Yusuf would have been preserved. The position, the social position of Yusuf would have been escalated. Yusuf would have gained a great authority in the palace that he grew up in. But no, Yusuf chose to be free when he was put in front of temptations and threats. And the threats did not make him deviate from the principles that he adhered to. Obedience to God. قال رب السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني إليه. He said, "Oh God, the prison is more beloved to my heart than what they are calling me or forcing me to do." He chose the prison. Difficulties after difficulties after difficulties after difficulties. Tens of years, decades of challenges, hardships. But if we zoom out a little bit, we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, we notice one brilliant thing, that Yusuf was actually in the making. Yusuf was being polished by God to be able to be ready for receiving or assuming that position of leadership of the kingdom of Egypt. Whether it's the kingdom or being a king or being a minister or prime minister, someone with a great level of authority. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was preparing him through these episodes, through these challenges, through these hardships. If you zoom in at every single episode, yes, it's painful. Very difficult. It's probably unbearable. But if you look at the bigger picture, you notice that there are other things, circumstances that were in the making. You see that, for example, in that kingdom, there was a king who was dying, another king who was assuming the leadership of the kingdom. These are circumstances that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is cooking for Yusuf. Other circumstances, for example, that the religious authorities were failing in interpreting the dreams of the king. And then, subhanAllah, the authority came to Yusuf when he was at the bottom of the prison. Apply this to your lives. See this, observe this in your individual lives. Hardships you go through, the financial difficulties, the relationship tensions that you might be having, the difficulties that you might be facing, the losses of loved ones, the losses of people who are like your father, people who would inspire you in your life, suddenly they disappear from your life. Unbearable hardship. Can you imagine the people who lived with Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam losing him in one night? Why, it's a calamity that we didn't live to witness Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam, but it's also a massive hardship. That we're lucky maybe that we didn't experience it, experience the loss of Amirul Mu'mineen, that once we live with him, we hear his speeches, we see his position in observing justice to the minute detail, we see his support to those who are oppressed. And we see his position fighting the oppressors, no matter who they were, until the last moment of his life. One night, you lose Amirul Mu'mineen. It's a massive test. The hearts of the believers shake. Allah talks in the Quran about those people around the Messenger of God, where He would say, هُنَالِكَ ابْتُلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَزُلْزِلُوا زِلْزَالًا شَدِيدًا. The believers in the battles, some points in time, their hearts were shaken, quaked, thinking, where is the victory from God? مَتَى نَصْرُ اللَّهِ أَلَا إِنَّ نَصْرَ اللَّهِ قَرِيبٌ. Allah would say, those people would ask, when is the victory and the aid of God? When it is going to arrive? There's been so much oppression. Allah answers, it is close. It is close. The help of God and the aid of God is close. Calamities that shape this Muslim ummah, that shape this community, to be the community that is worthy of passing on the message of the Messenger of God. There are processes that are in the making. And the same thing, you apply it to communities, to humanity. Do you think that justice will be established in humanity without difficult episodes that we should experience? Allah says in the Quran, no. No. There will be tests. That's the will of God. There will be tests. These tests, if you look at them at the micro level, if you isolate them from everything else, yes, you would not see but evil, maybe. People like myself, maybe. People who don't have the level of insight to see the beauty of God's making. Maybe that's how I look at things. But if you look at the bigger picture and you start connecting the dots, you see that no matter how grave the atrocities are that are being committed, you see that at the end of the tunnel, there's nothing but the will of God. There is nothing but the hand of Imam al-Zaman, salamullahi alayhi, preparing for the last days where justice will be established and it shall be established. Allahumma. These are the things that we notice from the story of Yusuf. In that story, in that surah, the beautiful surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves for us a few verses that honestly, they can be that torch that you can hold in the darkness of the night, or in the darknesses or the darkest of the nights of your life, as an individual or as a community. A couple of verses that I will mention. Surah Yusuf, that's chapter 12, verse 87, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, quoting Yaqub, after Yaqub lost Yusuf for decades, Yusuf is no longer with us. Yusuf supposedly was eaten by a wolf. Years pass. Yaqub would tell his children, Ya baniya, idhabu fatahassasu min Yusufa wa akhi, wa la tayasu min rawhillah. Oh my sons, go and search diligently for Yusuf and his brothers, or and his brother. Go search. Have hope. Have hope in God. He says it explicitly. وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. Never despair of the mercy of God. Do not lose hope in the mercy of God. إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Only those who are disbelievers lose hope in God. Yaqub, Jacob, what are you saying? You lost Yusuf. There's no hope that Yusuf is there anymore. There's no indicator that Yusuf can be alive. There is actually an indicator that there is a shirt with the blood of Yusuf on it. What are you saying that have hope in God that Yusuf shall return, find him? What are you saying? What are you talking about? That's the hope. That's the level of hope Yaqub is teaching his children. Go and search for Yusuf. Find a trace of him. Because if you lose hope, even if all the indicators around you tell you otherwise, you're not a believer. You're not a mu'min. You're not on the side of God. Allah says only the disbelievers lose hope from the mercy of God. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. Believing in God means that you believe that Allah is capable. You believe that Allah is the superpower in the world. Not any war machine. Not any genocidal regime. Not any ethno-supremacist colonial entity. Not any Zionist power in the world. Allah is the most capable. That's what you are when you're a believer. You believe He's the most powerful. He's the most capable. Even if it was all the world conspiring against you. Allah says, الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسُ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ. Those people who were told that all people have gathered around or against you, so fear them. Instead, their reaction was what? فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا. It increased them in faith. When the whole world conspires against the believers, they only increase in faith. Don't miscalculate how the believers work. وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. What are you terrifying us with? A few bullets? A few bombs? A few warships? What is this? It's a joke. You're a believer, you have hope in Allah. Allah is the most capable. How? Leave it to God. He knows His job. You do your job. Leave God's job to Him. That's the mu'min, the one who has hope in God. A believer is one who believes also that God has ways and methods for things to be accomplished. You believe that when you pray to God sincerely, yes, Allah is listening, Allah is answering, but not all the time the answer comes instantly. A believer means that you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be telling you, yes, I am answering your call, but this is a process. It might take 10 years. It's in the making. It's being baked. It's being cooked. It needs some time. It needs some circumstances to align. It might take 50 years. It might take 100 years. I am answering your call. That's what a believer is. You believe that God has ways and methods to do things, and you trust Him. That's one verse in that surah where Yaqub tells his sons, go and fetch Yusuf and have hope in God and do not despair. For only the disbelievers despair from the mercy of God. Have high hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Raise the bar. Raise it. You're asking the King of the Kings. Who do you think you're asking when you ask God? Second verse. Surah Yusuf, Quran chapter 12, verse number 90. Quoting Yusuf, that he said, إِنَّهُ مَن يَتَّقِ وَيَصْبِرْ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Surely whoever is mindful of God, whoever has taqwa and is patient and observes patience, then certainly God never discounts the reward of the good doers. Allah never puts any work of any doer in vain. إن الله لا يضيع عمل عامل منكم من ذكر أو أنثى, male or female, anyone who does anything, Allah is recording it. Allah would not leave the patience that you're observing in vain. Allah would not leave the taqwa that you're observing in vain. What does taqwa mean? Taqwa really means that you actually rectify your life, that you make sure that you live your life in a way that adheres to the command of God, adheres to the will of God, that you obey none but God, and that you never disobey God. You try your best to protect yourself against any sin. Taqwa, that's taqwa. You stick and adhere to your principles. That is taqwa. مَن يَتَّقِ وَيَصْبِرْ. There are two conditions here. That if you want a result, if you want your dua to be achieved, to be answered, if you want your goal to be achieved, have taqwa and have sabr. These two things should never be compromised in any community, no matter how difficult your goal is. Now we're looking at the world. A lot of people are looking at the world with despair. What is this madness that has been going on for a year now? Despair. No one is able to change anything. Taqwa and sabr. Many people are missing one of these, if not both. Sticking to righteousness, being mindful of God and the will of God, and sabr, patience. Patience means that you remain balanced in your life. You don't allow any threats or temptations from the enemy, that is shaitan, or those who work for shaitan, to shake you from the right path. You remain steadfast. That's patience. It's not that you wait and do nothing. You make sure you remain on the path. You make sure you don't compromise any value of your values. Patience. Yusuf accepted prison wholeheartedly. Yattaqi wa yasbir. Patience. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised his ranks in this dunya. You see many examples of this in the history of Islam as well. Patience, how important it is. 3 years in the Sha'b of Abi Talib, 3 years in the valley, that siege that the Holy Messenger of God and his companions, the early Muslims, they faced in the times of Mecca. 3 years of hardship, tough times, siege, disconnection, cutting off of any relations with those people. Sieged in a valley for 3 years. 3 years, that's hunger, starvation, maybe. But what followed was a qualitative transformation in the community. Why? مَن يَتَّقِ وَيَصْبِرْ. Taqwa and patience. A lot of times, many of us, maybe people like myself, they want results now. They want results tomorrow. They want results next year. And look and dig and you see those people, they don't do their part. They just complain maybe. يَتَّقِ وَيَصْبِرْ. Patience is indeed required. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran very clearly that if you observe taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would unblock any blockers in your face. Allah will find you a way. مَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Those who are mindful of God, those who fear God, Allah will create for them an escape. An escape. Do you know what that means? It means there is no way. There is no way forward. Wall. Stick to God, Allah will create for you an escape. Stick to God, and even if you had the sea in front of you and the enemy behind you, the army of Fir'aun behind you, and even when your people say, we have despaired, we are indeed doomed, taqwa means that you say, Kalla inna ma'iya rabbi sayahdeen, like Musa did. He said, no, I have my Lord, He will guide me. There was no indicator, one indicator of salvation. If there was, some of the people of Musa, they would have said, well, look, there's this solution. Let's go left, let's go right. There is no solution. It was darkness. Said no. But Musa did his part. It wasn't magic. Musa was still required to do something. He was still required to throw the stick. Maryam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have just given her dates magically in front of her. He said, no, you shake the palm tree trunk. Has any one of you ever tried this before? Has anyone ever tried how effective it is to actually strike the palm tree trunk? It doesn't shake. A fruitful palm tree, a well-established palm tree, it wouldn't shake if you hit it, let alone dropping dates. Allah is saying, look, there is something that you should do from your part, from your side. You do your part. Don't worry about the results. Have taqwa and patience. I'll give you the results. Don't worry when. Allah will give you an exit. وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And you rely on God, and whoever trusts God, He is sufficient for him. إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدْرًا. You trust God, you rely on God. Not that you leave things to God. Oh God, you do it. You help the people of Palestine. I can't do anything. You lift the oppression from the world. I can't do anything. That's tawakkul. That's laziness. Oh God, you help my neighbor. I know he's distressed. I can come to the mosque and pray for her or him. But I'm too stingy to share. I can pray, Allahumma aghni kulla faqir, Allahumma ashbi' kulla ja'i'. I can do this. But I can't actually share my food with that person whom I'm asking God to satisfy the hunger of. Allah tells the messenger of God, إِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ الْبَلَاغُ وَعَلَيْنَا الْحِسَابُ. You have the duty of communicating the message. On us is the recount. On us is the result. Don't worry about the result. The result is not your responsibility. Well, many of us want results tomorrow, after tomorrow. And so we think, so what? So what if I join this demonstration against the Zionist regime? It won't change anything. Many of us might be thinking this way. So what if I say a word of maybe education about what is going on in the world today? It won't affect anything. This person is living in the extreme of part of the world. So what if she or he knows? We belittle how important our role is. That's dangerous. Allah is saying, no. You have a part, you have a role to play. Don't leave it all to God. God does His part. You do your part. In the end, I can't finish, but remind of something. The Sayyid would say, a lot of calamities have befallen us. This world, if you look around, so many people have faced so much calamities, so many difficulties. In the Muslim community, historically as well, so many people faced tough hardships before any media coverage was there even. So no one would know about these massacres. Sayyid would say, whatever befell us cannot be compared to Hussein's calamities. What befell Hussein alayhi salam, all the things that we hear from the minbar for hours and hours, and we cry and we shed tears, all these were thrown at the heart of Hussein in 1 hour. Hussein, the remaining trace of the messenger of God standing before these people, representing whom he represents, and he faced what he faced. Hussein, whose heart was broken by seeing Akbar going to the battlefield when Akbar was the person who resembled the messenger of God the most in the looks, in the speech, in the morals, in the manners. Hussein, whose back was broken when Abbas fell. Brothers, sisters, if you want to understand the loyalty of Abbas, Abbas in Karbala had many chances to leave Hussein. Abbas in Karbala received messages from the elite of the army of Yazid saying, oh, our cousin, you are our nephew. We'll spare you. Leave Hussein. Leave your values. Leave your principles. Otherwise, you are dying with Hussein. You are safe. We give you a promise of security. And Abbas would answer back and he would say, you are giving me a promise of security when the son of the messenger of God has no promise of security. Cursed is your promise of security, and cursed may you be. Abbas, who never left Hussein till the last moments, Abbas, who would still say no. Abbas, who would still stick to Hussein alayhi salam, to the path of Hussein alayhi salam. When he was feeling the sweetness and the coolness of the water under the scorching sun after days of thirst, Abbas didn't shake or compromise. The loyalty of Abbas, to understand it, you have to remember that on his way back, when he was bringing back the water to the camp of Hussein, to the children and the women and the thirsty people, Abbas's right arm was severed and he would still not shake, but instead he would remain steadfast on the path. He would say, by God, if you sever my right arm, I shall stick to Hussein. I shall stick to the path of defending my faith and values. To understand the loyalty of Abbas, you have to remember that after his left arm was severed, he would say, by God, if you sever my left arm, I shall never leave the grandson of the Prophet. Understand the loyalty of Abbas. You need to see that Abbas kept moving forward even after his head was smacked with that iron pole by those accursed people. Understand the loyalty of Abbas. You remember that Abbas would never call Hussein, oh my brother, but he would always call him, oh my master. Narrations tell us that he would say, oh my brother, in the final moments, because his heart could not bear to leave this dunya without tasting the sweetness of calling Hussein, oh my brother Hussein. That's the loyalty of Abbas alayhi salam. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept sacrifices of those who lived their lives like the life of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, and who gave their lives like Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, being an example of the ziyarat Ashura, as we say when we pray to God, Allahumma ja'al mahyaya mahya Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Oh God, make our lives on the footsteps of Muhammad and Al Muhammad, and allow us to leave this world on the way of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, to the souls of the martyrs, all those who gave away and sacrificed what they had for the right causes, for the right values, for justice, for love, for peace, for humanity, for freedom, for the people of Palestine's rights of living just life. Let's recite Surah Al-Fatiha with salawat.